Good late evening, everyone. Hope you're doing well today on this Wednesday. I'm catching up a little bit here, and I wanted to have a brief discussion on some crowdfunding information that I came across and that I've had some small experience with myself. Um, I've been part of a Kickstarter that was pretty involved. Unfortunately, it did not reach its goal, but still learned a lot in the process. And I figured we could talk a little bit about that situation and how I was able to learn from that, even though the goal was not fully met, and how that situation could be a little bit different for someone like yourself and this day and age and how the technology has changed. So we'll talk a little bit about that and let's see where we end up. So I really don't think this will be that much longer in terms of speaking. I know I say that a lot, but hopefully I mean it this time, and I will do my best to make that accordingly. All right, so let's get to it. And one of the first things that you're doing is the planning of it, but setting the realistic goals while you're planning it. One of the things that I've come across as I began to develop some of my titles. Let me see if I can pull up a example here. Oh, would that be? Of course, I can't find it, and I had it already bookmarked. There we go. Starfield, Starbreaker. That's not it either. You never find it when you need it. There we go. All right, let me pull this down real quick. That's general public. So, for instance, a friend and I, for our planning, we started a Discord channel, and what we're doing is making pretty much different sections for us to talk about. Um, Barker's setup. That's a good friend of mine. His name Mike Barker. Yes, goes by a different call sign here, but nevertheless, Mike has been working on a tactics based uh, title for some time now. I'd say for about a year now. So pretty much XCOM like type situation. It's one of those things where we're like, well, if XCOM developers don't want to make it anymore, we might as well. So I helped him out by giving him some source resources to begin with, meaning Unreal Engine resources, a little bit of cash to go and buy some assets out of the marketplace, and pretty much just get started with that stuff. Got him a decent video card, so he could get up and running, and pretty much was there. So Mike's setup is that, whereas on me, for my top-down shooter, the planning of it, that's funny. I'd say like the latest development in terms of planning things out. Like we are saying, planning and then making sure you don't bite off more than you can chew. One of the first things I'm looking at is how to create levels for my for my for my shooter. So these levels that I'm making here, um, set to somewhat scale. But one of the things that I have to consider as I'm making these maps and my experiences for the game is the verticality for bullets right now is very linear, meaning that it's only on really one axis, or my y axis. And so, in order to have some verticality where the player can shoot either in a 45-degree angle, I'm going to have to put up a lock on type of situation. So, for instance, if I had a character that was up here, but it was just shooting down to someone down there, it would be one of those situations where you would have to aim lock in order for the bullet to traverse the right area so that the line could actually potentially hit. Um, Now the thing is that enemy AI doesn't have that situation as much, but players, we pretty much have to make sure that that's a seamless type of thing that you can get into. So one of these things I'm doing here is just making some maps to start out with different amount of walls and some cover, and I've got a light, simple cover system for bad guys to go into. But I wanted to create something like this first, so that I could at least come in and figure out where I can generate my enemy spawn points and where I want to start patrol points and that type of thing. So this falls in line with that planning type of situation here. And I have a tool. I'm using Stable Diffusion XL at home with a comfy UI type of interface to start things. And so I'm using a little bit of artificial intelligence to create these first starting maps. So this is the end result of what those things look like after giving the prompt a little bit of guidance in terms of what I needed and how it will be set up. All right, that's not right. I think I can go away. I'll bring this back. Okay, so wrong one. I had a feeling it would do that. Apologies. There we go. All right, so when you're planning and you're setting up some realistic goals, I think that having decent um, theories of what your levels look like on paper before you actually begin building them out. I'm talking about the most, minuscule of details that need to be there. You can pretty much do thumbnails on a napkin to develop your levels if you wanted to and take snapshots of it and bring it in Photoshop and upres it. It really doesn't matter where the source of inspiration comes from, so long as you get it from somewhere. That all being said, the planning is a very different aspect of it, but just as important um, within setting the goals of how it goes. So, defining the project scope, outlining project scope and the core features of it, and setting the boundaries so you don't overpromise or risk scope creep. Scope creep, I'd say, is one of the more um, things that you really have to look out for. That they seem innocent at first, but it's amazing how much you want to incorporate or add different systems, and then you start looking at the feature creep that comes about as a result of it. Excuse me. At some point, you really have to take in consideration whittling down or really taking stock of what functions are most important, so that you can nail those key aspects down. And then if you have time later, you can look at something like a part of the scope as a flex goal, or as something like that to get to, just in case you do actually have time left over to actually do something. So funding goals is also something. Calculating a realistic fund target that covers your development, your marketing, and some unforeseen expenses. Platform fees and reward fulfillment is another thing to consider. It gets a little sticky there, so make sure you lawyer up in the process of having to do something like that. You really want to make sure that your butt is covered completely when it comes to terms of funding or dealing with other people's money. Very important. Make sure that you're doing your due diligence not only on your own paperwork, but on the person that's willing to lend you said money, so that you can understand exactly what you're getting into. Last thing you want to do is get into an agreement with someone who, come to find out, has shady numbers behind the due diligence in which they provided you, meaning that they could jeopardize your actual project, as because they weren't being fully straightforward in terms of how their numbers were working. So just something to look out for and think about. Stretch goals, that's also another part of the planning part that goes back into the feature creep idea. Um, Stretch goals is really something that we look at and consider after the key elements of what we need that gameplay loop or feature to be. And if we have time, then we can go back into it. So that really much falls into stretch goals in terms of the actual features of the game development. But in terms of like setting the realistic goals, talking about achievable goals or promising major features that could strain the budget, that's a very interesting one. For instance, I look at games like Star Citizen. I don't know how long Star Citizen has been in development, but it seems like a long freaking time. I'm thinking over 10 years, and we're still not sure when we're going to get a full blown, hey, this game is titled, ready, and set for Goldmaster candidate. The last time I played Star Citizen, it still played quite janky. There's a level of control and fidelity that's just not there yet. So here's hope to it that it is, because the world is pretty immersive at times. It just so happens that it's buggy as hell too, even though it's had development of 10 years. So see if they can get their stuff together. And on top of that, they're staffed like crazy. They've got money out the wazoo, and they've also got a good amount of talent within their halls to get this done. So maybe they've been working heavily on Squadron 42, and Star Citizen has just been an afterthought for a couple years. I'm not so sure, but I'd like for them to get their stuff together. All right, so speaking on things like Star Citizen or Forever Winter, which I think is another interesting crowd-funded early access title that seems to be doing quite well, is communication strategy. That's a very important thing. I think one of the things, like Project Page, clearly explain what your project, your timeline, and your goal is. Like, for instance, I think one of the things that the Forever Winter did incredibly well, let me see if I can pull up their tag, is give you an explanation of what the game is about and how you as a player fit into it. And it has a very distinct um, art art style, and I think them leaning into it was very smart, because I'll be honest, that's what got my attention. And then I quickly was able to actually be, part of it, and get a feel for what some of this stuff looks like. I'm looking for some concept art here. All right. All right. Okay. So, so this was the first thing I actually saw for it, was this image here, and it just says that you are not this guy. Actually, this thing is freaking terrifying on the battlefield. You need a very heavy gun to take care of them. But nevertheless, I'm a big fan of that Metal Gear Solid type of aesthetic, and so this kind of spoke to me. And just so looking at the character designs, and as I watched and took a little bit more interest into it, one of the things that they really dove into was showing this bleak but beautifully crafted, that term, I hate that term for some reason, but beautifully set up world that, post-apocalyptic, survival horror scavenging um, title, which, in terms of on the surface, was something that was right up my alley. So, I was like, okay, let me give it a shot. And then come to find out the early access was about $25 to start. When the game would go into full release, it would be around $45 to $50. So figured I'd get in and support these folks and see how good it is. Um, and so far, so good. I would say that as a game, um, I have not had my heart race or have as many jump scares as I thought I would have on a title like this. So it has been an absolute blast. So, here's hoping that they can continue going on with it. But in terms of an crowdsourced situation, they've done an incredible job of uh, getting the word out and getting a few and getting noticed with a little bit of work. So not a little bit of work, but getting noticed with the little bit that they have here. So anyway, um, kudos to them in that regard, and let me keep that going. All right, so project page. That's what things you clearly explain your project, your timeline, your goals, showcasing the concept art, just like I was talking about Forever Winter concepts, where your mock-ups or your prototypes, regular updates. That's another thing that you should do. Now, whether or not you post those updates on some type of social media platform or your own blog situation or website, so that you're just sharing milestones and challenges and progress, weekly, bi-weekly updates, to keep your people, pretty much keep your backers engaged. The one thing you definitely want to do for to show that your backers that you're actually doing work with the money that your backers provided you is giving them updates, and those updates could be in the form of just quick little snippets, a paragraph here, a paragraph there, explaining the progress, or if you have a snag going on. You'd be amazed at how often people are willing to extend the olive branch in terms of having to figure out how to figure out a bug for the sake of betterment of the game. It's just one of those type of things. It's kind of cool. So transparency also comes into that, and that means communicating openly about the setbacks or the changes of the timeline. That's something I just mentioned about on there. So just be really open with the people that you're supplying or potentially supplying a piece of software for, to let them know how things are going and to provide your occasional video or maybe even some type of playable that explains where you are. And when you have an actual playable that you can provide to folks, they quickly become testers of such title. So that's something to consider. That you also your most loyal players will actually spend their free time pretty much bug testing your game. So just something to think about. And in regards of that, so you're talking about backer engagement. Feedback channels like Discord are very important these days. Forums, surveys, social media groups, hosting social media fire chats or something, or fireside chats or something like that's also a good idea. It doesn't mean you need to do one every day. It doesn't mean you need to do one every week. But here's an example. When I was at Digital Addiction, the seven of us would take turns hosting a weekly trivia game that we would host on Digital Addiction's website, where we would give away prizes and different other types of goodies for people coming in and checking out the website and actually playing a couple games of Sanctum with us. And that was kind of fun. We did that for a good 6 months to get some awareness out and have some engagement with the people that really began to really like and get invested in the title, because the title Sanctum was, at the end of the day, a collectible card game where we base revenue off of the number of cards people would purchase. So we wanted to keep that engagement connected with folks, and we found a good way of doing that was to have a trivia night about once a week. Early access testing, that's another thing. Offer early versions of the software to be certain backers. So essentially, it's an opportunity for testing, incorporate feedback on the development. Excuse me. It's one of those times where I think it's very essential to get some feedback from someone outside of your bubble, but is all for making sure that you have a great experience at the end of the day. So having some type of build or a beta release is very important, and Forever Winter went about that. And that's pretty much how I had gotten a notice of it in terms of gameplay, was that they released a couple betas that some folks had started showing out on YouTube. Firstly, because the look of the title, and then we quickly transferred over to the gameplay, which was actually pretty fun. Now, in terms of project animation management tools, things like Trello, Asana, Jira. At OVFX, we've used two. We've used Asana, and we used Autodesk's version, which is what's called ShotGrid. Well, first it was called Shotgun, then it was called ShotGrid, and now it's called Flow. Now, they all three versions of that managing tool pretty much do the same thing, but it's essentially Microsoft's version of, say, not version control, but keeping track of your tasks, your issues, and any type of deadlines, so that your production managers can keep abreast of everything. Tools help ensure that team members are aligned and the project stays on schedule, and it holds people accountable for what they need to be working on, as well as giving them a timeline to do said work, and giving you an area and a window in which you can have communication with just that person without having to interject anybody else within the situation. So another thing consider, and I think is very important, is having some type of chief financial officer. If you're not good with money, don't try to be good with money. Have someone help you out with said things. It's good, especially when you start really having some type of revenue, and you've got things like taxes and payroll, and you want to make sure that you can get tax credits, and you want to make sure that your paperwork is legit, that your ducks are lined up, your T's are crossed, your I's are dotted. Um, if you have that straight, it's typically fairly easy to, I wouldn't say, well, yeah, it's typically fairly easier. It's a hell of a lot easier. Let's put it like that. It's a hell of a lot easier to get things like apply for grants or get in front of important people if those type of situations are in place. So sometimes they're just looking to just root out those that can't follow directions. So if you can stay on top of your things like that, folks tend to get the impression that you have your shit together and are more willing to give you a chance than they would someone else. So when it comes to managing those funds and the resources, having someone like a chief financial officer of some sort, that's very important. Especially like I said, when you start branching out and you've got multiple people, and all of a sudden you have to worry about things like vacation and personal time and 401ks, and that's a lot of numbers and nuances that you have to keep in your head, especially if you're the type of owner that's also a creative. You're not going to have the energy or mental capacity to fully do everything effectively to a point where things just work well. So it's best to have people in place to help you out with those things. Now, a reserve of contingency funds, small percentage of your funds for unexpected expenses or delays is always good, especially like in our field of business. Computers break, stuff either goes out of date. For instance, one of our issues now is that machines are starting to get a little long in the tooth, so I have to get multiple machines or new machines for everybody. Um, so right now, I'm looking at hopefully getting a set of Threadrippers with decent video cards attached to them, so that each participant in the office has something that's a bit more close to the form out there for your typical workstation work. So funds, contingency funds can be a number of things, and it might be, oh crap, everybody's working late, we need to get pizza. It's a number of things. It's essentially a your software company's equivalent to petty cash is what it is. And then you have reward fulfillment, physical rewards from partners, reliable fulfillment services to do this. So like T-shirt printing companies, that's a very good one. Um, so for us, that was one. But then there's other things out there where you can get into partnerships with others where they like print like either smaller toys or stickers or it runs the gamut depending on what you were able or what you were wanting to create for your users to experience and how much they were also willing to pay for it. Now, in terms of your post, now when I think about that, you think about reward fulfillment. First thing that comes to mind for me of a bad case of reward fulfillment was Fallout 76 when they provided those ugly, ugly duffel bag backpacks that were completely different than what was actually advertised. So you really want to go into a situation and keep the goodwill of the people that spent extra money for a game that they can't even play yet. So the last thing you want to do is screw them over with a bait and switch type of situation. So be not like Bethesda when it comes to that. Now, to Bethesda credit, they did go back and actually create the actual duffel bags that were advertised as to be made from the extra giveaway, considering folks paid good money to have that happen. But it's just one of those situations where folks need to be diligent and pay attention from it, and also hold those that promise those type of things accountable to keep that in place. Speaking of keeping things in place after you're done, you're talking about post campaign movement, um, where you would have regular updates. Back in the day, it was a little bit different because you were uploading to BBS boards, and if folks had a fast enough, or even if they had internet, they could they could go and download the latest patch or patches for said title that they might have been working on from our BBS boards when I was at Microprose. Now that changed considerably when higher speed internet became a thing, and all of a sudden cable companies started providing internet access to um, residential areas. And when that happened, it was a bit of a boom when that occurred. Um, Keeps it back here. Let me show them up here. Updating final development stages. Yep, release dates and any other goals I might have on. So yeah, just it's so pretty much like newsletters. There's a lot of easier ways to do this now these days. Like I said before, you could have a Discord channel set up, and that Discord channel could roughly represent a place where 70 to 80%, hell, even 100% of your work is actually being shown for others to participate and help you figure out. So maintaining active communities, like I was saying before, Discord, social media, backers can discuss the software and then give back feedback, especially to the people that are excited about your release. If they're excited about your release, you don't want to give too much information, but you want to give just enough so that it's dangling the carrot so that they have to figure it out. I like to call it like it's uh, augmented reality game or ARG. Um, I think the movie Cloverfield did a little bit of this, where they kept giving little Easter eggs about the film and different parts, and if you could dig around on the internet and find certain clues, it would give you some insight. It wasn't too much insight, but it was still a fun little thing to do, and I think it also engages your constituents as well. And on top of that, keep that engagement after release, continuous improvements. So that means bug fixes, post launch updates. For us, a cooler party title that we're working on, we've also got this beat 'em up title that coincides with it, where we were able to take the movie assets and res them down and optimize them for more of a beat 'em up type of game experience. Um, so we did that, and that was pretty neat. It's something that we're still working on, but I say all that to say that we initially wanted to start with, say, 4 characters, and then at some point, maybe a month after those 4 characters have been used and played through for the generous populace, release 2 to 3 more other characters that have a different type of gameplay loop, but yet can still fit within what's already there established for a challenge. So, improvements on the title, post launch updates, sometimes being able to provide free DLC um, are ways to grant goodwill to your fellow gamers. And then you've got the common pitfalls. So, avoid scope creep. I think I said that at the top of this call. Um, Feature creep is real. So you want to make sure that you stay cognizant of when it's too much and then when it's starting to fall out of the scope of your vision of your game. Especially when you're starting out early, you want to try to keep the vision of your titles a little. You want to make sure they're ambitious, but not overly ambitious to the point where it's like, whoa, there's no way you're going to possibly be able to finish this within a semester, or that type of thing. You're better suited at 1,000 swings as opposed to trying to perfect the swing once. Um, at this type of situation. So I would like to have you experience as much as you possibly can outside of that situation so that you can be comfortable with it when it actually matters. So avoiding that scope creep, very important. Um, not unless you something like you were saying, but for here, in part of the original plan, unless they're fully funded through the stretch goal. So adding those type of features is tempting, but try to avoid it because all it does is like extend what you got to go and get in there, and it becomes a distraction of the actual gameplay loop. Um, I think the developers of Fable, well, the original developers of Fable, Peanut Monolith's team, one of the things that they did constantly was overpromise. Do not, please do not overpromise. The internet will hold you to the full coals for it, and a level of distrust or that you can't get the job done will follow, and you do not want that. So try to not overpromise. Keep them grounded in the project's reality, as well as the timelines and the goals and the type of thing that you can meet. And I think if you have that there, that's a hell of a lot more explanatory than what was there in the first place. And finally, managing delays carefully. Um, delays are If delays are unavoidable, communicate them clearly. Make sure that you're very transparent with your backers or your fellow gamers with the situation. Explain the reasons, and you can adjust the expectations as needed for that. But I would say the biggest thing about being late or being a little behind on something, just be transparent. Let them know what's going on. Last thing you want to do is have to do a smoke and mirror thing for them because, it didn't work at the last hour because maybe some, DLL popped off wrong or something like that. Um, so yeah, managing the delays carefully is also a key part of it. So just try to stay cognizant of that and being smart with your time, and then being very observant when something like feature creep starts to pop up, and then also being very quick to identify the feature creep, call it out, and call it a stretch goal if it's too good to be true. But the sooner you can leave that thing by the wayside, the sooner you can be finished and focused on other things. Okay, so right now we're talking about these planned milestones that we had here for common pitfalls and a few other things to think about. And I wanted to keep this one fairly short. I think I might have ran for about almost 20 minutes or so. So I'm gonna treat this one short, like I said before. But obviously, if you have any questions or anything, we can continue this out, and I will talk to you soon.